All right, I'm going to need to break up your discussions, although glad to see all the lively conversation happening. Hopefully, you found some people out there who want to be city council members and mayors and congressmen. Or I know Mike's daughter actually loves animals and is interested in helping with animal control. And then, that's a government job, right? So now we'd like to invite our presenter up to speak. I'd like to introduce Josh Harder. He serves as our U.S. representative for California's 10th Congressional District. His family has been here in the Central Valley for generations. His great-grandfather joined a wagon train in search of gold, but stopped to start a peach farm in Manteca. Josh was born and raised in Turlock and graduated high school from Modesto High. He earned a political science and economics undergraduate degree from Stanford and a joint MBA MPP from Harvard Business School and Kennedy School of Government. He and his wife Pam live in Turlock, and I'd like to invite Congressman Harder up here to speak this morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you all hear me? Is this working? Okay, fantastic. Well, it's so great to be with you. It's so late in the morning, I'm a little worried that folks are going to have to go on, but it's so good. I've met with many of you. I know lots of you are so engaged already in our community, already doing so much good work. I thought what I was asked to chair today is a little bit less on the political side, which, given the circus in Washington these days, sounded great to me, sounded fantastic, and share a little bit more about the personal side and what actually drew me into public service, a little bit about my story, and a little bit about how I think we can all learn and work together and hopefully have more folks entering service in our community. And so I think I'll just start at the beginning by talking a little bit about what got me engaged and excited about this role. It really starts with my family. As Leah shared, fifth-generation resident of the Valley, grew up in Turlock. My parents, my dad was the one that was a fifth-generation resident, or I guess he was the fourth generation. My parents actually met working in a poverty health clinic in the Dominican Republic. My dad's an optometrist. He runs the cleverly named Harder Optometry on Orangeburg between College and Tully. And he just graduated optometry school 30, 40 years ago. And my mom was working in public health. At that time, she wasn't in California. She was actually living in North Dakota, working on Indian reservations, doing some really tough frontline healthcare work there. But they both had a heart for service and especially for healthcare in the developing world. And so they both went to the Dominican Republic. They met. Their first date, my dad took my mom on a moped driving around the Dominican Republic. My mom said, "Wow, look how big that cat is." My dad said, "That's actually a rat." So they were meant to be. They were doing great. And my dad convinced my mom, after only 6 weeks of dating, to get engaged, to marry him, to kind of move on out to California, which I thought was fantastic, or now I think is fantastic. I'd much rather be here than in North Dakota. It seems really cold up there. And I think that they really gave me a sense of the importance of serving your community. They've done it pretty much exclusively from the nonprofit and through their church. But I think what I knew growing up is how important the community had given me so much. My first job was working at the Turlock Journal as a paper boy. Went through the public school system, graduated from Modesto High. I know there's some Mo High grads around here, which is great. Go Panthers. And then got a scholarship from the Modesto Rotary Club and the American Legion to go off to college. And I think my story is really one where this community gave me the best that you can really give anybody. And my commitment is to make sure that I could give that back to others. Because the reality is we live in an area where not everyone has the opportunities that I did growing up here, where 80% of the kids in our area are in free or reduced lunch, where we have an unemployment rate that is much higher than the national average. That's the work that I really wanted to be engaged in. But I wasn't sure in what way I could do it. I thought at first maybe I would do it, maybe I'd become a doctor, maybe I'd study, do healthcare. Then I started taking some biology classes, realized that wasn't going to be it. And then I thought, okay, maybe through business, because if I'm really concerned about economic development, if I really think we need more entrepreneurship, then I should really get involved in business. And that's what I spent most of the beginning part of my career doing, and I loved it. I was helping, small companies, 2 guys and a dog in a garage, scaling up to being thousands of employees. Companies like Blue Apron that does meal kits in a box, Pinterest, which you may use if you're ever planning a wedding or a big event. Both large public companies now, and then taught business at Modesto Junior College, which I loved, helping folks right here start a company, write a business plan. But what I came to believe through that experience was that the challenges that we are facing are not bottlenecked by a lack of great doctors. They're not bottlenecked by a lack of great entrepreneurs. They're not even bottlenecked by a lack of great teachers. In many ways, we need a political system that is addressing some of the root causes of a lot of the challenges that we face in our community. So that's why I decided to get into politics. Another question that was offered is what can other folks do who are interested? Even outside of politics, how can people be engaged? I really think of community engagement at 3 levels. I think of it first and foremost as the example that we set by others just by living our ordinary life. And that was very much the example that my parents set for me. When I remember vividly when I graduated from Modesto High, I was really proud of myself. I was, kind of a cocky 18-year-old that was doing well at school. My dad came up to me and he said, "I'm really proud of you." And I said, "Of course you are. Look how great I am." I didn't exactly say that, but I kind of thought it. And he said, "You know what I'm most proud of you about in high school?" I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, it's not the grades you got. It's not any of this other, accolades. It's the fact that you spent the last 2 years driving another kid to school who was from a tough background, who wouldn't have had any other mechanism to get to high school." And I thought about this, and it's true. I had actually taken a guy that I didn't know that well, who was in a really tough family situation, had no ride, because remember, I was going to Modesto High, but living in Turlock, so I had a long ride to go. And my dad said, "You know what matters much more than achievement is character." And that made a major impression on me. And I think that's where service and community inspiration really starts. It starts with the example that we set to other folks. The second level, or the second area that I think is really important is direct forms of service. And that's what my parents do still every single summer. They go to a place in Latin America, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, set up a poverty health clinic, work with local doctors to deliver frontline medical care to communities that need it. And they also do a lot of the same stuff out here. And I know many of you in this audience are engaged in direct service of one form or another. And I think that is a critical level. And if every single person in our community was more engaged in direct service, we'd be in a much better situation. And then the third level that I really think about is advocacy and voice. And this is really critical because I think, I often say my biggest job in Washington is to remind people that California is more than San Francisco and Los Angeles. And the best way that we can do that is make sure that as a public official, I can give a megaphone to the voices in our community. And that means that every person in this audience being a strong advocate for the interests of their region. Sometimes people feel that elected officials don't want to hear from them. I can't speak for all elected officials. I feel exactly the opposite. I want to make sure that I'm listening to folks, that I'm understanding the direct concerns of our area, listening to the advocates who actually understand what's going on. That allows me to make better decisions. And so, look, if you think about that spectrum, going from setting an example in your own personal life for your kids, your neighbors, your community, direct service, going on out, making sure that you're delivering services, whatever those may be, and then being a voice and an advocate to make sure that those service needs are lifted up and people are aware of the needs, folks can find their cup of tea at any level. They are all critically important. But I think you have to basically do one of the three, or hopefully at least the example part, and make sure that we're doing our best to come together as a community. Now, I have another minute 30. I really appreciate the clock in the back. It's very specific. And then we'll open it up for questions. But I was also asked to offer a couple thoughts around local concerns. And what are the sorts of issues, challenges, opportunities that we can be working on right here? A lot of the stuff that I work on has national implications, things like water infrastructure, storage, really critical here. But most of it is trying to make sure that we're getting the needs of the valley well represented. I'll mention two. The first and foremost, I think, is homelessness. And I remember growing up here, the homeless problem that we had several decades ago is really been morphed into the homeless problem that we have today. Hundreds of folks living in a tent city outside Modesto breaks all of our hearts. And I think we want to make sure that we're moving to a community where every person has the opportunities that they need to have a roof over their head, a good place to sleep. We all have to work together. This is not going to be solved by some politicians in Washington. It's got to be solved at the local, at the state, and at the federal government working together. And we got to be able to work on the root causes of what are actually happening with homelessness, which is the mental and behavioral health and the substance abuse challenges that we see, as well as the lack of affordable housing. I was over at the homeless shelter, the homeless encampment, the homeless tents a couple days ago, and I met a young man, and he told me his story. And he said just a year ago, he had a job, he had a home, he had a loving family and a couple kids, and then he had an accident at work. He ended up going to the doctor, getting prescribed opiates. His life deteriorated. He ended up with a substance abuse problem. And within a year, he had lost his job, he'd lost his house, he'd lost his family. Now he's living in that encampment. And there are so many folks that need help in our community, and it's got to be a community-wide effort to make sure that we're getting the resources for folks in need, to make sure that people with that situation and others are able to raise their hands up, say, I need help, and that they're actually going to get the help that they need. So with that, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm happy to open it up for questions about whatever you want to talk about, and thank you so much for all your careful attention. Thank you. And we have Mike. There's Ron. Yeah. Mike and John. And you raise your hand if you want to ask a question or offer a comment about things that you think other folks should know about what we're talking about.
Margot Souza, I want to thank you for responding to my request the other day about the cost of medications and insulin.
Yeah.
So thank you for responding, and I know you're going to work on that issue.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big issue. I met a mom the other day of a 7-year-old girl with type 1 diabetes. And they have the best insurance that's possible in the Central Valley, and she still pays $5,000 out of pocket for her daughter's insulin and medication for her diabetes. This is for a 7-year-old girl. And I thought about this, and I said, this girl is going to turn 18, and her parents are going to have spent nearly $100,000 over those 18 years just allowing her to become an adult. Think about what that could do if you're actually, you putting that as a down payment for a home or a student debt or anything else. And so it's a huge challenge, and I appreciate your comment. It's something we're working on.
Thank you. What exactly is being talked about in our hallowed halls of government about solutions for homeless problems? I've been to quite a few meetings talking about the homeless issue, but I've seen very little ideas that can be applied and used immediately to reach into those communities.
Yeah, it's a great question. I know we have a couple city council members here in Modesto who have a whole bunch of stuff that they can talk about at the local level. I'll talk about it at my level, which is it's not rocket science that we need more affordable housing and we need more mental health and substance abuse help. And right now, the young man that I talked about, if he was to raise his hand, he was to say, I need help, he would be placed on a waiting list to get opiate treatment in Stanislaus County. To me, that's outrageous, right? That's for somebody that has recognized that he needs help, let alone all the people that haven't quite gotten to that place that we know are actually in need. And so what we have to do is we have to be able to attract more physicians, more nurses, more medical folks here to provide those services, and we got to build more housing. Two things that I've done. I don't want to make this too much into politics, but I'll mention a bill because you asked. Last week I introduced a bill that's going to bring 10,000 doctors to California by creating medical debt loan repayment for physicians working in nonprofits in California. That's a program that the California Medical Association estimates will support 10,000 doctors, because we have half the doctors per capita in our area that folks have in the Bay Area and elsewhere. The second thing is that last month we got a $3 million grant for the local housing authority that's going to go directly towards affordable housing projects. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on both those camps. Thank you, Ben. Don't be shy.
Just wanted to ask real quick about, we have two things. One is frontline communities where you have obviously homelessness, but then there are those that are near that point because of affordability, mostly renters. That's one. And then number two, is there anything about the talk of lack of infrastructure connectivity at the federal level coming to some of our frontline communities?
Yeah, absolutely. When you say frontline connectivity, do you mean things like rural broadband, or are you talking about like trains, roads, bridges?
Well, yeah,
Transportation.
No, more like connections.
Connections.
In terms of within the cities or infrastructure. Yeah.
Look, we need a lot more infrastructure. The worst bridge in California is the 7th Street Bridge in Modesto. That has a score of 2, according to the American Civil Corps of Engineers. That's not 2 out of 10. That is 2 out of 100, right? That's the situation that we're in. We've got a lot of work to do, and the challenge is really not what is the biggest priority. The challenge is how you pay for it and making sure that we actually have the resources necessary. I think this has got to be a nationally led effort to make sure that we're putting infrastructure spending across communities of need, and especially here in the Valley, where we're growing 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of California. Another project that I'm really focused on, which I think would help everybody in the Valley, but especially frontline communities, is expanding BART over the Altamont Pass from Dublin, where it terminates now, into Tracy, Manteca, hopefully to Modesto. There's 86,000 people every day that go over that pass. None of them are here because they are all already in their cars driving on that brutal commute. If we ultimately, we got to make sure we have the infrastructure to support that before we can get to the real challenge, which is bringing those jobs here so folks can work in the same communities where they actually already live.
Is there much that you know about the desalination of water for California so that the Central Valley can have its water for agriculture?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't hear your question. The desalination of water? Yes.
Right.
So
along the coastal areas, because that's where then we would need to redistribute our rights and property, because there are previous laws that say that we have water rights, but they're being trumped by politics.
You're right. The reason my great-great-grandfather settled in Manteca in 1850 is because we have the best soil, the best water, the best climate in the entire world. That's why we're the fruit and nut basket of the globe. 80% of the world's almonds are from California. But the only way that we make sure that that's secure for the next 50, 100 years in the future is if we maintain the water that we have today. This is a huge challenge. Desalination is one potential solution. So this is making these big plants that are either at a coastal area or elsewhere that take salt out of ocean water. It's very energy intensive, and because of that, it's very expensive. I think I've supported research and development into ways towards making that cheaper. But let's be honest, we also have a lot of water everywhere else that's going out to the ocean. And what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to store that water. We need to make sure that we have it down in groundwater recharge, And then we also need to make sure that we're putting it in above ground reservoirs, things like Canyon Reservoir, which we're got the funding to do a feasibility study for out near Patterson, and then also pushing for more water recycling. So all of the wastewater that happens in Modesto right now goes to North Valley Water Recycling, which is a great project. It's the largest water recycling plant west of the Mississippi, which is fantastic, but also kind of scary. Why aren't there anywhere else? There's a lot of other cities larger than Modesto, west of the Mississippi. What's happening to their wastewater? So desal, I think, is part of the solution, but I think building reservoirs like the ones that we actually need, I think building more groundwater recharge, those are solutions that are cheaper per the amount of water that you get and much easier to get built because we have some real success stories already here in our community.
I think we have time for one very quick question.
Okay.
John, you've got hands over there. Okay.
Oh, good morning. Josh, two things. One, I want to thank you for the service that you have given us, and I'm amazed by your visibility in our community. Thank you for showing up for the things you show up for. And then I guess secondly, I'm wondering, how are you finding Washington, and how in the heck are you staying focused with all the nonsense that goes on up there?
Yeah, it's hard. America would be a lot better off if more of America looked like the Central Valley. And by that, I mean folks of different political ideologies coming together and trying to work together. And one of the big problems in Washington is that most communities don't look like ours. A lot of Washington reflects people from San Francisco or from rural Texas, where you don't have to work and live alongside folks that have different set of beliefs than you may have. And that is a real struggle because it is shocking. We are a purple island in a very wild kaleidoscope across the rest of the country, and we are much more unique than I think we actually should be. I think we'd be a much better country if we had more areas like us. I'll just share one story real quick, not to get too much in politics because it went into your question. I was walking outside, first week in Washington, 8 a.m., Monday morning, had all these people behind me. There was 2 big buses. I asked the security guard, I'm like, which bus should I take? He says, well, there's the Republican bus and the Democratic bus. And that broke my heart because that may work if you're from a community not like ours, but it doesn't work for us. I ended up grabbing a bunch of my colleagues and walking to Capitol Hill instead. Everybody's going in the same direction. You should be able to go together. And so I think the best thing the best advice that I've gotten is to try to ignore the cable news food fight that exists, the circus that people are trying to engage in, and focus on the unique challenges that we have, which are not about partisan ideology. It's not about party lines. It's about making sure that we're addressing the homelessness, the water challenges, the same concerns that you guys are all working on. It's making sure that we're shining a light on the valley that goes ignored and overlooked far too often, as opposed to engaging in some of those discussions, which frankly, have a lot more losers than they have winners. So, thank you. Of course. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, we do appreciate your feedback. I had somebody last month, they really ragged on me, give us paper. So that's about how their voice did sound. And so we're going to give you paper as well. If you don't do technology, great. Paper works for all of us. So I want to let you know, Helen, where's Helen? Kellen is back there. Josh did have to leave, but Helen's there. So if you didn't get your question or concern to Josh, Helen will stick around and talk to any of those and talk with you about that. So Tuesday night, Josh spoke to about 200 high school and college students, and I'm going to give you their concerns, and there were 5 of them. And I know some of you had concerns about what you talked about this morning, but their number one concern was how are we going to pay for college? Number 2 was climate change, which for our valley has a lot to do about transportation and getting cars off the road. Number 3 was gun violence. Number 4 was immigration, and number 5 was health care. So with the generation that's right behind you and behind us, those are the concerns. College, climate change, gun violence. Climate change was about transportation, immigration, and health care. So those are the things that they were concerned about. So if you want to know some of those things, those were helpful for us. But I want to show you some things. When we think about, so what do we do here? Let me give you some action points that I thought about even as I've thought about this morning. So the first thing we want to say to you is, again, continue to meet people in the room. I've talked to a couple of you this morning. Hey, before you go, can you grab your calendar so we can have some coffee? I'd love to get to know who you are, and I just want to get to know you. So that's the first thing. So do that with somebody in the room or somebody out in the community. And then the second thing, of course, is today, just maybe share with somebody. Hey, I was at Catalyst this morning, and here's one thing that Josh said. I agreed, I disagreed, but have some dialogue and some conversations. So let me give you some takeaways that I put together just to give you some ideas as we don't just sit around, but we actually do something. So when it comes to what's happening, I want to encourage you to keep listening, considering, and learning. So we had a politician up here. We're about to move into an election year, which means we're probably not going to have elected officials up here because of it's just better that we don't. But I want to encourage, so that's why we did it here. Let's do it as quick as we can. But I want to encourage you to keep learning, keep listening, keep growing. One of the things that encouraged me is I don't care if you're far left, I don't care if you're far right, but move. Keep learning and keep growing. I have friends who, 20 years ago thought I was still the same person when I was in 2000. And, in some different views and different things, and I've moved. I've nudged here and there. And that's a good thing. So I want to encourage you, keep listening, keep growing, keep learning, and keep asking questions. Also to encourage positive dialogue with the opposing views around you. Can we, ask, I'm curious, how'd you get to that? I'm curious, help me think through, what are you thinking? To ask that question, I'm curious, points it back to the question and the concern, not, dude, you suck, I'm curious. Try to stay away from that. So I'm curious, can you help me understand how you get there? I'm trying to figure this out and learn and actually sit and listen. So I want to encourage you around that. And I do want to say, I captured this thought earlier, and I wasn't going to say it, but I will now. There's some of us in the room, we very rarely interact with people that are different in views than us. Now consider the flow of the last couple of weeks. Did you actually spend time or interact with people who might be, quote unquote, different than you? So I want to encourage you, look for those people. And ask, I'm curious. Can we get together? I want to ask, I'm curious. Can we meet? How'd you get there? And actually with respect, try to have a positive dialogue. Stay informed about local concerns, yours and the concerns of others. And this has been interesting. So when the other, is that is interesting for me is when I say to you in the room, you have concerns because most of us are a certain generation. But then when I show you what the high school students and college students are concerned, their list was probably a little bit different than yours. That's a good thing. And so I want to encourage you to go ahead and stay informed about local concerns. And all those concerns could be racial, they could be cultural, they could be socioeconomic, they could be poor and rich and middle class and east side and south side and west side and north side. There's all those concerns. And so I want to encourage you, continue to keep your head up and looking for those different perspectives, but stay informed. I want to encourage you maybe to take leadership in the health and well-being of your neighborhood. If community transformation is going to happen, it has to be, first of all, in the neighborhood level. We could talk about the condition of our families if you want to even get deeper, but I want to encourage you now, maybe you need to take involvement in your neighborhood. Just walk down the street and wave at people. Or have people here, we're going to just promote this Halloween event, but take leadership for a neighborhood. I want to encourage you maybe to support a political campaign. Somebody's left or right or middle, up and down, whatever it is. But get involved. And I've discovered as I've been a part of some community coordination and involvement, it tends to stop at the door of an elected official. No matter what we end up doing, it seems to always end up at an elected official's door. And so I want to encourage you, the best people, whoever they are, get involved. My mom, I love my mother dearly. I always got to say that as I say something negative about my mom. And so she's not on YouTube. She won't ever see this. So I love her dearly. But for a long time, she wouldn't vote. She said, they don't care. They don't care with her Spanglish. And I said, Mom, I love you to death, Mom. But if you don't vote, I don't want to hear about it. I don't even want to hear about it. So she votes now. And she votes differently than I do. And you know what? Mom, complain all you want. Say whatever you want because you voted. You darn right. She's 90 years old next week. So support a political campaign of your choice. Join a local board, a commission, a committee. The community organizations are desperate for and are needy of quality people to come alongside. I just met Denise Nordell of Friends of the Library. See, Denise, I got that plug in there for you. And she's looking for people over there. Jeff over at, let's see, don't say it. I don't know, whatever you do, Jeff. They need them too. And or run for elected office in advance of discussions. I have a friend who's going to be running for one of the roles, and this person probably isn't even going to get a lot of votes, but this person wants to be a part of the conversation, just to be a part of the conversation and advance some issues. And so I want to encourage you to, if that's your calling, man, jump in there. If that's something you want to do, whether win or lose, you advance the conversation. Because you all know if we are going to be a good city to grow up in and grow old in, we've got to have excellent public officials and public servants. We do, and that's you in the room. That's you in the room. So I want to encourage you with those kind of things. So let me mention a couple of others. So action, some takeaways. Let me mention a couple of things, and we've got a couple of minutes. Matt, why don't you make your way up here? But let me mention a couple of things. We've got next month, Marvin Jacobo is going to be talking about transforming a city. And he's a knucklehead. We had to fill a spot. But every November, we want to stop and pause and take a look at where we've been and where we think we're going as a group. Now, you might think that City Ministry Network, by the way, who is City Ministry Network, we're going to tell you what to do. We want to say to you, though, wisdom is in the room. And so there'll be some conversation. There'll be some interaction. And, again, continue to get your wisdom. I appreciate Josh being up here. The truth of it is, you are the wisdom in the room. And so we want to continue to encourage that as Marvin tells you what he thinks. So that's next month. So we're going to have some fun. I tried to come up with a very, very lively and provocative title, but I couldn't come up with them because I stink at titles. So let me see what's next there, guys. And I want to encourage you at the back. There's upcoming community events. One of the events we're promoting is we do want to continue to be a city of great neighbors. So there's a Halloween event that we're encouraging you maybe to take and do something in your neighborhood for Halloween. And Jeff is back there pitching if you have any questions. But we want to encourage being a city of great neighbors. We've got Twain Hart Hill back there who is very key to the Modesto Neighborhoods movement. So let's continue to get involved in our neighborhoods. And then tonight, a local conversation on immigration. So my friend Matt Sorens, who is key around the country for World Relief, is just going to tell you, just take the time I told you to take on immigration.
Okay, so just 3 hours. Okay, no. Yeah, I just really want to invite you all. It's really wonderful to be here in Modesto. My name is Matt Sorens. I work with World Relief and with some of my local colleagues here in Modesto, but I work outside the Chicago area. We're going to have an event this evening, 6:30 at Heart and Soul Coffee, which we'd love for all of you to come out to. Encourage anyone else who can to come out to. That is just to have a conversation around this complex topic of immigration. I don't have to tell you that immigration can be a little bit controversial in this community and across our country. Last week, I was on the border in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, met with some Border Patrol leaders, and they gave me a tour of one of the tent facilities that they've set up to process people seeking asylum. I met with a church leader from Juarez, from the Mexican side of the border, who was actually kidnapped recently because the smugglers thought she was maybe competition instead of just someone helping people provide shelter. It's a very complex issue. I came back to my home in Chicago the next day and heard the announcement that the number of refugees being resettled to the United States, so very different process where people are identified overseas and invited by the U.S. government, is going down by 40% from what it's been in the last year. So this is an issue in the news. It's an issue that affects this community very profoundly, and we just want to have a conversation. We're not there to tell you this is what you need to believe or this is how you need to vote, but how do we think about these complex issues? What are the facts on the ground? For those of us who are coming at this from the perspective of the Christian faith, and at World Relief we work with a lot of church partners, how does the Bible inform how we think about this conversation? So we encourage you to come out tonight, 6:30 at Heart and Soul Coffee, and then I'd also just mention tomorrow night World Relief Modesto will be there at 6:30 again, so same time, same place, with a number of immigrant leaders from different backgrounds, different stories of how they came to this community. So come to one or both of those events, and we would love to have you be a part of the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks. This conversation matters to our community. There are 30,000 of our neighbors who are already in the process of becoming legal citizens, but of course the system right now has been stalled, and there's a lot of challenges and all that. So again, this is about human beings. This isn't about politics. This is about people. So I want to encourage you to come out if that's something that's of interest of you, because we do care about loving our neighbor. So, all right, listen, we're 2 minutes over. Have a great morning. Bless you. Stick around and talk. I hope you can. There's people in here that you probably need to meet. So, all right, bless you. See you later.